Plants are the building blocks on which all living things depend because most plants can photosynthesize. That is, they can convert the sun's energies into sugar and starches, which can then be used by all living things. People have always put plants into groups, things like herbs or medicinal plants or trees or fruit trees, and today is no different in that plants are classified into groups called divisions, and those divisions include algae, mosses and liverworts, ferns, cone-bearing plants and flowering plants.
There are many different systems that are used to classify plants today. One of the most simple involves dividing plants according to characteristics into groups called divisions. A brief look at each of these divisions and their characteristics illustrates the amazing array of plants in the world. Algae may be single-celled, as in some of the algae seen in pond water, or multi-celled in the case of seaweed. Primitive algae were thought to be the first plants. Algae reproduce most commonly by division. Mosses and liverworts are multicellular and are familiar to many growing in cool and moist positions. They reproduce by spore and in some cases by division. They do not have a system of veins, which means that they are only capable of growing into small plants.
Ferns do have a system of veins or a vascular system and are therefore able to grow much taller than either mosses or liverworts. Ferns also reproduce by spore on their mature leaves, which looks a little bit like this. The spore then grows into this special structure called a prothallus, which then develops into the mature fern. Cone-bearing plants, like pines, produce both male and female cones. The male cones produce pollen grains. The female cones produce eggs that after fertilisation develop into seeds. They are usually wind-pollinated because they evolved before insects and could not use creatures like these to cross-pollinate. After pollination, the familiar cones form on the plants. There are huge numbers in the world, which are normally grouped in large forests.
Flowering plants have a higher degree of specialisation, which means that they can live in a variety of climates and situations. Plants may range from tiny alpine plants to towering trees. Some flowering plants live for thousands of years. Others live for only a month or two. Most flowering plants have flowers that combine male and female parts in the one flower structure. The male parts, stamens, produce pollen, and the female parts, carpels, produce eggs. Fertilisation leads to the development of fruit. The fruit contain the seeds. In summary, plants may be grouped according to their level of complexity and their reproductive cycle into algae, mosses and liverworts, ferns, cone plants and flowering plants.
In horticulture, people are normally more concerned with the individual plants rather than with the plant divisions. If you're going to work with plants, some idea of how plants are named is going to be essential. Plant names are written in Latin, which can be a little bit confusing for some people. So what is wrong with common names? Well, this plant is a bottle brush, and this plant is a bottle brush, and so is this plant. So as you can see, one common name can refer to a whole range of plants. Common names are used alongside botanical names in the horticultural industries. Botanical names are preferred in situations where it might be important to be precise, such as on landscape plans, on nursery lists, or when buying stock. Botanical names are also used worldwide. Everybody knows that this is a gum tree, and most people would realise there are many hundreds of different types of gum trees. This particular one is a tallow wood. The botanical name of this plant, like all plants, is made up of two parts. The first part is called the genus name, in this case eucalyptus. The word genus is a word that means kind, so this kind of tree is a eucalyptus. The second part of the name is called the species name. This name tells you precisely which eucalyptus we are talking about. The species name for this plant is Microcorys. Botanical names are often used to describe the plant or where it came from, or maybe even honour the person who named the plant. For example, eucalyptus is a Greek word that means well concealed, which refers to the way in which the flower buds are well concealed by this cap before they open. The species name Microcories is a Greek word which means small helmet, which refers to the small covering over the bud before it opens.
Botanical names should be written in lower case, small letters, except for the first letter of the genus name, which should be a capital. Some people also underline the name or put it in italics. The meaning of botanical names are useful to learn more about the plant in order to identify plants and remember their names.
Many of the plants which are grown in gardens today have been especially selected perhaps for flower colour or for plant height or some other characteristic, and these plants are commonly called cultivars. This particular plant here is called Grevillea robin Gordon, probably one of the most common cultivars of all. It came about when David Gordon, the founder of Myall Park, crossed this plant, Grevillea banksii, with a close related species. The seedlings that grew from that plant were called hybrids, and one of those hybrids was Grevillea robin Gordon.
Other plants growing in our garden today have come into being as a result of a mutation where a branch has changed form in some way and perhaps has produced different coloured leaves or flowers. To produce more plants with that different form or flower colour or even leaf type, that original branch would need to be propagated from cuttings so that the form is not lost, as would be the case if the plant was reproduced by seed. An example of these mutations can be found in this cotton lavender, Santolina, where a green plant produced a golden shoot. If more golden plants are required, cuttings must be taken from the golden branches. So as well as the usual two parts to the botanical name for plants, a cultivar name may be added. It's not usually a Latin word and often sounds more like a trade name like Robin Gordon, Pink Remembrance or Peewee. In summary, botanical names are made up of two parts, the genus and the species. The genus names a broad group or kind of plant, and the species name tells you precisely which plant is being described. In cases where a plant has been selected or hybridized, an additional name is sometimes added. That name is a cultivar name, and it's always written in single quotation marks.
Understanding how plants are classified is interesting in its own right. Botanical names are essential for all horticulturists who want to communicate in a precise and professional manner.